A large part of Kundalini bodywork is about embracing both our multi-dimensional and multi-orgasmic selves. The multi-orgasmic part is quite pleasurable, and this pleasure is needed if we are to open up to our multi-dimensional nature. But as we are learning, we need to develop a non-dual mindset, to not have attachment to our pleasure, thus not creating unhealthy polarities such as sadness and pain in ourselves or others. Although many choose to deny it, we all have an aspect that is trying to create balance. And many of us would rather harm, injure, or do wrong to ourselves or others to create this balance, opposed to not having it. It is a very deep and subconscious program within us. Kundalini bodywork is teaching us to create and work with polarity in a multidimensional way to create evolutionary balance. These might sound like buzzwords, but once you have a grounded understanding of them, little else will make sense, and the rest of humanity may start to appear slightly mad and misguided. A multi-dimensional nature and a non-dual mind gives us the ability to see polarity in a different way. And learning to be multi-orgasmic helps us get there, as does the polarity framework, which we cover later. For now, it's important to find healthy ways out of the negative polarities that our minds create. One way to do this is to recognize and accept the multiple and conflicting truths within us. The most obvious example of this is my heart loves her, my mind thinks she's a bad idea, and my sex wants both a kinky girlfriend and a wife. By applying the abstract concepts of multiple dimensions and multiple truths to our personal experience, allows us to grasp these concepts quickly and ground them into our everyday life. In this course, we are applying a physics perspective to the dimensions 3D, 4D, and 5D. Our physical body is in the third dimension, a 3D solid object, always here and now, living in the present moment. Our mental body is fourth dimensional, a 3D object moving through linear time, moving through time and space. And our emotional body is fifth dimensional, beyond time, space, and physical matter. As our three bodies operate in three different dimensions, they speak three different languages, often finding it hard to understand each other, especially when we don't breathe in between our thoughts and feelings. Without enough breath in between thoughts and feelings, the mind just keeps going forward, often leaving the body in a traumatized place or leaving our emotions confused. The act of proper breathing is like alchemy, as energies move and circulate through the different dimensions and the bodies of our being. Whereas not breathing enough in between our thoughts and feelings means we don't let the healthy 5D aspects of our emotional body in, the higher vibrations of our soul. So we can only create an unhealthy and incomplete experience of fourth dimensional reality because we have locked conscious awareness into our minds, into 4D. So if 3D, 4D, and 5D all have their own polarities going on about the same subject or issue, and they all live within us, when we start to breathe in between our thoughts and feelings, these three levels of our being communicate. The polarities within them become relevant to each other, and we move out of the stuckness that our inner polarity created, out of our happy, sad in 5D, right and wrong in 4D, pleasure and pain in 3D dynamics. Meaning that I could be happy that I'm wrong while experiencing a lot of pleasure, which for some people is the essence of their orgasms anyway. Creating evolutionary balance can be as simple as learning this concept and then applying the breathing and other tools that we learn in Kundalini bodywork. Explaining this concept in 3D, 4D and 5D, as well as physical, mental and emotional, and heart, mind and sex, gives us a greater perspective, so it becomes much harder for the mind to go back to a linear way of operating in the world, back to shallow breathing with a tense jaw, little emotion, and no natural or authentic power. You can think of this communication like an old-style manual camera, multiple settings such as light, focus, and aperture, which all need to align for us to receive a clear picture. And they align by us taking deep breaths in between our thoughts and feelings. But of course, we are more complicated than a camera. We are a paradox. And in one moment, we experience a dimension one way, and in another moment, a different way. In each dimension, truth looks different. Our job is to weave through the different dimensions and even alternative timelines if your mind stretches this far, creating healthy polarities and understandings that our linear minds can grasp. It is only by working with our 4D linear mind, accepting our non-separation, interconnectedness, soul, and timeless multi-dimensional nature, that we can begin to explore more of what human consciousness is. An immature mind has an egoic idea of total control and needs to mature by seeing itself as a vital part of a system, not the master of any system. Our minds are amazing. Our linear experience of time is amazing, but it's only amazing when we relate to our mind as a vessel for consciousness, a consciousness that also resides in our body, heart, and all our glands and organs, as well as our etheric field. Our sexuality works differently to our mind, often more animalistic and in the present moment. It wants what it wants when it wants it. And generally, this is about creating a free flow of life force, and occasionally, for some people, but not all, babies. One of the main ways that we learn to move between the different dimensions of our inner being in order to integrate them is through our breath. From a fifth dimensional perspective, it's our humanness and our imperfections that make us perfect. They allow infinity and love to exist. So one of the main things to do is to take this abstract concept of fifth dimensional awareness to an experiential understanding by embodying it into our 3D and 4D understandings, allowing conscious awareness to move from our mind to our heart, to our stomach, and even outside of our body. Our 3D, 4D, and 5D levels of understanding and experiencing the world need to be in constant communication so that they can learn and grow together. If you are not yet sure how we create this conscious, constant communication between our different bodies, then you should probably start this video again. As although the concept is very mental, the answer is very simple, important and fundamental to everything that we are learning, and I really don't want you to miss it because of all the words I'm using to express this concept. The next exercise allows us to physically break some of the boundaries between our heart, mind, and sex, loosening the fascia, which is the connective tissue between our physical expressions of these three dimensions, softening the jaw, the sheath around the spine, clicking and opening the spine naturally where needed, and relaxing our whole nervous system through the vagus nerve. This is similar to what Antidote to Mula Bandha does for the gut, but to our whole body. So don't forget to be working with the releasing and transformative breaths. Releasing breath is Ujjayi, in through the nose, out through the mouth. And the transformative breath is ujjayi, in and out through the nose. But of course, you know this by now. Very simply, we are looking for circular movements, both clockwise and anti-clockwise, that we later change into figures of 8. But figures of 8 that can kind of dance in a gyroscope. First, we find and develop a simple movement in our hips, and we stay here for a minute or two, with breath moving conscious awareness into our pelvis and our gut. After spending some time here, and now this is where it's stiffer for most people, we want to find these same movements at the sternum. It can help to take your middle finger, either hand, and just softly press on the sternum, the breastbone, and find these movements. Try to relax the body and allow the body to move itself. Finally, we find these movements in a very soft and gentle way in our neck. And for this, we can put our middle finger softly on our third eye to help us find the movements. Once we have all 3 of these places open, hips, sternum, neck and head, sex, heart, mind, start to allow them to move together, to dance together, to find a rhythm that changes. This is basically impossible, but try anyway, as the learning and the release is in the trying, not the succeeding. Avoid repetitive movements from the mind, as we are not trying to control the body from the mind to make these movements. We are trying to relax the body so much, feeling it with breath and surrendering to it, so we can unwind all the tension and resistance that our mind created through control, removing the chaos, the emotional, energetic and physical blocks. This allows honest and clear communication between our heart, mind and sex, between 3D, 4D and 5D. It allows us to access our power and allows creative, sexual, healing and spiritual and all other energies to flow freely through us, allowing Kundalini to flow freely through us. It is also a good way of embodying this mental concept into the body. By learning this concept and then taking the body into these movements with breath and feeling, we confirm on every level how our 3D, 4D and 5D selves work together. Avoid repetitive movements for long periods, as this generally means that the mind will create a pattern and then controls the body with the nervous system and stops listening. We may do the movements almost perfectly, but the consciousness is then only in the mind. Imperfect movements are preferred if it means consciousness is free to move around your body, glands and chakra system.
So this is just a very short demonstration of making the figures of 8. It's a short demonstration because, well, it just looks a bit silly really. So the first thing we want to do is get a sense of how our figure of 8 dances in a gyroscope. So you just want to start to take your hand and make a figure of 8, do it horizontal, vertical, run it in different ways, do it diagonally, just get a feeling that this figure of 8 can dance around in a gyroscope. It's quite fun, a little like a child playing with a sparkler. Now we want to start to take that movement and first put it into our navel. So we're just dancing this figure of 8 in a gyroscope from our navel. When we focus on the navel and we're making circles here, sometimes I like to focus on my navel, other times actually on my lingam. So if you're a woman, this would be deep inside your yoni, kind of where your cervix is. You might want to move around having the focus on the navel and then to your lingam for a man and cervix for a woman. We're not doing repetitive movements, we're still working with our breath, we're just trying to break muscle memory, break patterns. We don't break patterns by repeating them. Now we want to feel how that movement can start to go up from our navel and then into our chest, and practicing all the breaths that we've previously learned. So breathing out through the tongue, ujjayi through the nose and in through the mouth. So you can think of the 3 bandhas in yoga, the 3 locks where we move energy up, and you can also think of the 3 pumps in Taoism. So when we're pumping our pelvic floor, we're moving the spinal fluid up through the spine and eventually to the skull. And there's different pumps in our body that do this. And it's very helpful just to think of sex, heart, mind when we do these. So as we're making these figures of 8, just include everything we've been learning. Long, deep breaths, pumping on the in-breath, pumping on the out-breath, transformative breath, releasing breath. Eventually, after you've done all 3 places, you're going to want to come to stillness and meditate. I don't know how long that's for, and as you can see as I'm demonstrating here, it's very important to smile. Always smile when you're meditating. Now if you want to go a little bit further, we can just lay down onto our belly, onto our back, and do the same thing. When we add some resistance onto the floor, we get a different experience when we have something to push against. Still making these figures of 8. We're just trying to find the sex, heart, and mind connection. It's really, this exercise is a metaphor in the same way that breath and sound and movement release trauma. As we take the trauma out of the body, breath, sound and movement will allow our 3 centers to communicate. Physical, mental, emotional, heart, mind, sex, 3D, 4D, 5D. And also you could try it on your front, move around, just have fun. You're going to look silly anyway. The most important thing is to have fun.
Our 3D, 4D and 5D explanation of dimensions is just one perspective. And as we are talking about multiple dimensions, there are multiple and conflicting perspectives, ways of describing the experience of consciousness that we are each having. Once your mind is okay with the fact that this perspective contradicts another that you heard and value, then you are truly ready to practice this work. More esoteric perspectives show 12 dimensions of consciousness, acting as a continuous cycle of separation leading back to oneness. Quantum physics has similar descriptions, but in practical day-to-day terms, I find it much easier to work with 3. Although in the tantric embodiment exercise, we are clearly working with energies and dimensions from a 6th, 7th and 8th plane of existence. These are energies that are connected to our soul, but closer to oneness, although they still have a sense of separation, a purpose or an agenda, if you like. As our consciousness moves from our sense of separate self, it moves up into higher dimensional levels, where the experience of separation is less until we move back into the 12th dimension of consciousness to simply become pure energetic potentiality into oneness, source or God consciousness, later rejoining the circle of life. At least this is one perspective, but past a 5th dimensional perspective, what a multi-dimensional reality is teaching us is that every possibility and probability has the potential to be real. It just needs our energy and belief to create it. If you can imagine a completely different universe with different laws of physics, vibrating on a different frequency with different universal laws, so not governed by the law of attraction or polarity, then it potentially already exists in a feasible way. This is similar to realizing that if you can imagine your own life in a different way, then this alternate timeline and reality has a very high probability of already existing, not as a polarized opposite to you, but simply as one of the many alternatives, each with their own polarities. And when we are conscious of these other polarities, we can use them to expand our own in our present reality.